So everybody, the first thing I'd like to take you through is the importance of preparing the hair before you actually start your style or your long hairstyle. So one of the things that I've done here is what we like to call a directional blow dry. Now directional blow dry is really important because it makes it so much easier to be able to pull the hair up into a ponytail. And you know that most of our long hairstyles usually come from what we like to call an anchor point. So what I've done here is I've actually prepped the hair first using some mousse, and I've done a double mousse technique. So I've actually applied that to dry hair. So by using it on dry hair, I get a much stronger result and more grip on the hair as well. So I don't believe in using straightening irons to smooth the hair when you're doing long hair. So it's really important. What I've done here is I've actually sectioned the hair off into primary, so center front to center back, and from middle of the ear to the middle of the ear. So primary and secondary sections, so our 4 quadrants, or some of you would know or refer to it as a hot cross bun section basically. And then what I've done, I've taken that section and I actually apply my mousse. Now, one of the things about using your mousse is you need to be quite generous with it. So taking your mousse, and when you apply the mousse, make sure that you apply it all the way nice and evenly, and then once you've finished applying it, make sure you distribute it through really well. Okay, so what I do is I work through it on a quadrant and I apply that mousse. Now the mousse does dry out, so what I do is after I've applied it to that first quadrant, I then start to use my paddle brush, and with my paddle brush is how I blow dry and smooth the hair. Now a lot of people ask me why I don't use a round brush, and the reason why I don't use a round brush is because what happens is when you use a round brush you get lots of volume and lift in the hair. Now the whole idea of using a directional blow dry is to make the hair, the roots of the hair, go in the direction that you want it to go. So basically through here, and I use a paddle brush. Now tip, don't put your blow dryer and melt it onto the hair. So you use your hair dryer, and what I'm doing is I'm combing the hair through and using a nozzle on the hairdryer. So it's really important not to blow dry it around, because if you blow dry it around, there's lots of shorter bits of hair that are growing through. You may have some broken pieces of hair in the hair. So, try to not blow dry it around too much so you activate the texture. So we just want to create this nice and smooth. Now I don't want to melt it on the brush. Also too, another thing, make sure that when you're blow drying, don't do this. It just makes it twice as much work and you put too much air in the hair. So what we're trying to do with a wrap drying technique is reduce the volume in the hair and make it much smoother. And so that then when we go to put it up, it's really easy. So as I said, do one quadrant and then let that fall, and do the other quadrant, and then I start to work on the front. Now when I come around to the front of the hair, what I like to do is, rather than using horizontal sections and blow drying it with the paddle brush, I quite like or prefer to take what I call diagonal back sections. So by using a diagonal back section and then blow drying it, what that does is it makes the hair sit to the curve of the head and it sits flatter. You don't get that buffiness. So, if you were doing it horizontally, you'd get too much volume. So using our paddle brush, diagonal back sections and work across the head. So that's once we've blow dried that hair and we've got those lovely ends, mid-lengths and ends looking nice and smooth, you might even need to use a smoothing cream on the ends or a little bit of an oil, particularly if those ends are quite sensitized or quite dry. So, just using mousse on itself the hair still might feel a little bit brittle. So working all the way through, and then what happens is I've finished my completed 4 sections. And I'm going to show you the next. As you can see, this is our completed directional blow dry. But how did we get from this point to this point? So after we blow dried our 4 quadrants using our paddle brush, then what I like to do is again go back to my quadrants. Now I need to think about where I want that ponytail to sit. So can you see here, because we've already directionally blow dried it, how beautifully that hair is going to sit back. And so when we tie our ponytail back, it's going to be lovely and smooth and all of the hair is going to be running in the same direction. So how did I get to this point? What I did was I started in my front section and I go to my first quadrant. And once I've broken that quadrant down, I then work, like we're putting our colour on in the salon, across the quadrants. And also too, what I use is I change my tool and I use a comb. So using a comb, what I do is I use the comb and I put it to the curve of the head and I hold the nozzle on the dryer. And what that does is with the heat, then let it cool down and then take your comb out. Now a little bit of a tip, be very careful not to put a dent in the hair from the comb because the heat will change the rest of the hair. So I put it in and I direct it, and then as it cools, I mold it to the curve of the head. So then I keep taking my sections continually across that quadrant, and as you can see how, because this has been done earlier, see how beautifully that hair is sitting to the curve of the head. So it's going to make it really, really easy when I go to pull the hair up and tie it up into a ponytail. Now another thing too, it depends where your ponytail is sitting. So you might be doing an asymmetric hairstyle that could be sitting over to the left side of the head. So you may tend to, rather than taking it up, you may tend to take it over and around. So can you see the difference there? Now another thing too, a lot of us as hairdressers, when we're doing the back of the hair, we often get that lump or that bump at the back. So to stop that from happening, go through and again, take diagonal sections, and I'm going to blow dry that hair. So I actually start at the top and work my way up. So just doing diagonal sections, diagonal backs, and doing the hair up and back with the blow dryer. Take my next section. Now also too, what you might like to do when you're doing that, sometimes what I like to do is I like to spray a little bit of setting spray on the hair. Use my comb, mold it with the dryer, take it out. So can you see what that starts to do to the hair? So it's already pushing the hair in the direction that we want it to go. Then once you've done that, all I do is I just take it all through and just basically give it a little bit of a blast over those ends just to make sure that those ends are nice and smooth. Sometimes what I might even do is I might pop a little bit of smoothing shine or a little bit of serum, just very lightly, just to polish the ends before I actually start creating my hairstyle. So everybody, that's the tip and the trick on how to create the perfect preparation or directional blow dry before you start your hairstyle.